Sophie Cunningham spoke on Unrivaled, and as she was speaking about it, she clearly spoke on the conflict of interest that Napheesa Collier and Breanna Stewart have with the WNBA in negotiating a new CBA deal.
Sophie Cunningham just said what everyone's been thinking, but no one in the WNBA has had the courage to say out loud. On her podcast, she called out the clear conflict of interest with Unrivaled's founders, also serving as vice presidents of the WNBA Players Association during CBA negotiations. She said it with a smile, while most players have stayed silent, even when it comes to defending Caitlin Clark amid all the unnecessary drama.
So, lads, Sophie Cunningham has said what we all know. She said what we all know, we all agree with. And it's good a WNBA player has finally said it. Because I do think that it's important that, players are talking about this and not just blindly agreeing with what people that we're not fully convinced want the league to continue to happen are saying. Because let's be real, there is a massive conflict of interest with Unrivaled and with NECA now, with everything.
Let's talk about it. Is Sophie Cunningham the only WNBA player bold enough to speak the uncomfortable truths? Or are the others staying silent to keep their careers safe? Share your thoughts in the comments.
We got Sophie Cunningham on her podcast just coming out and saying what so many people have been saying, but you haven't heard it from any WNBA players up until this point. But we know when it comes to Sophie, she doesn't seem like somebody that is going to hold her feelings, her opinions inside. She's just going to, there it is.
Let's get clear on exactly what Sophie Cunningham said, because the details matter. On the November 6th episode of her podcast, Show Me Something, Sophie was talking about Unrivaled with her co-host when she casually dropped a truth bomb that everyone's been thinking but no one else has dared to say out loud. She pointed out, and I'm paraphrasing, that Breanna Stewart and Napheesa Collier are phenomenal, elite players, but they're also vice presidents on the WNBA Players Association's executive committee and co-founders of Unrivaled, a new basketball league that happens to pay players a lot more than the WNBA. Then Sophie smiled and said, that could be a little conflict of interest. A little? That might be the understatement of the year, but at least someone finally had the guts to say it.
If the owners say, we'll give you X amount of money, X amount of rev share, since that's the phrase everybody wants to use, but you can't play an Unrivaled, well then, at the most basic of levels, Napheesa Collier and Breanna Stewart would say, ooh, I don't think we should take that deal because our business, our little baby called Unrivaled, is going to cease to exist if we take this deal. So at the very first step of the negotiation, we see a conflict of interest.
Here's why this issue matters more than most people realize. The WNBA and its players are in the middle of negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement, the deal that sets the terms for everything: salaries, working conditions, and revenue sharing. It's a huge moment that will shape the future of the league for years. Typically, these negotiations are straightforward. League owners on one side, the players' union on the other, both working to strike the best possible balance. The union's job is to represent all players equally and fight for the strongest deal for everyone. But here's the problem. In this case, two of the union's vice presidents, who hold real power and influence in the process, also happen to run a competing league that stands to benefit if WNBA salaries remain low. That's not just awkward, it's a serious conflict of interest that can't be ignored.
Wasn't there. But here's my take about Napheesa Collier. Why she should not be in these, leading these negotiations, the voice of these negotiations or anything like that. She owns a rival league. I know it's called Unrivaled, but I think that was an oxymoron, and I think it was done on purpose. This is not Unrivaled. These leagues are rival leagues. And Napheesa Collier, as co-owner along with Breanna Stewart, owns a rival league. There's always been a conflict of interest.
Let's be clear about why this matters more than people want to admit. The WNBA and its players are in the middle of negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement, the deal that sets salaries, working conditions, and revenue sharing. It's a defining moment that will shape the league for years. Normally, these negotiations are straightforward. League owners on one side, the players' union on the other. The union's job is to represent all players equally and secure the best deal possible. But this time there's a major wrinkle. Two of the union's vice presidents, Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, also run Unrivaled, a competing basketball league that pays players six figures for just a few weeks of work in the WNBA offseason. Now think about that dynamic. The average WNBA salary hovers around $120,000 for an entire season. If Unrivaled offers similar or better pay for far less time, it becomes a more attractive option, especially if WNBA salaries remain relatively low. That means Unrivaled's success actually depends in part on the WNBA not raising pay too much. I'm not saying Stewart and Collier are sabotaging negotiations. That would be absurd. But the appearance of a conflict of interest here is undeniable. And in any business involving millions of dollars and hundreds of careers, appearances matter. This isn't complicated legal theory, it's common sense. Professional sports have dealt with similar situations for decades. When NFL or MLB players launch side ventures that could compete with their leagues, those relationships are scrutinized and managed. That's just standard professionalism. Yet in the WNBA, this potential conflict has gone mostly unspoken, until Sophie Cunningham said what everyone else was too afraid to say. The WNBA loves to project an image of unity. Players standing together, fighting for better conditions. But that solidarity has limits. No one wanted to publicly question whether having Stewart and Collier in union leadership while running Unrivaled might be a problem. Maybe it's because they're popular and respected. Maybe players don't want to rock the boat during tense CBA negotiations. Maybe calling out successful black women entrepreneurs feels uncomfortable, even when the concern is legitimate. Whatever the reason, the silence was deafening, until Sophie broke it, and that's not out of character for her. Sophie's been one of the few players consistently willing to speak uncomfortable truths. She defended Caitlin Clark when others stayed silent or joined the pile-on. When Clark was targeted with cheap shots, Sophie called it out. When people questioned Clark's Rookie of the Year win, Sophie said, yeah, she earned it. Now, she's calling out the obvious, unrivaled conflict of interest that no one else wants to touch. Why is Sophie the only one saying these things? Maybe she's secure enough in her career not to care about backlash. Maybe she believes honesty and transparency matter more than popularity. Or maybe she just refuses to play the PR game that keeps most athletes safely bland and controversy-free. Whatever the reason, she ends up saying what a lot of fans and media are already thinking, but what her peers won't acknowledge. The practical conflict here is real. Collier has been one of the loudest voices pushing for higher WNBA salaries, a fair and valid stance, but she's also running a league that benefits when the WNBA can't pay more. Stewart faces a similar dilemma. She's one of the most decorated players in the league's history, but her business success depends on WNBA players still needing off-season income. If the WNBA suddenly paid players $300,000 a year and extended its season, would Unrivaled still thrive? That's an open question, and that's the problem. Some have tried to downplay the issue by saying Unrivaled happens in the off-season, so there's no conflict. That's nonsense. Injuries can happen at any time, affecting WNBA careers. The financial and attention competition is real. Fans, sponsors, and media time are limited resources. If people are watching Unrivaled, that's time and money not spent on the WNBA. And claiming that Unrivaled's 3-on-3 format makes it different is semantics. It's professional basketball played by WNBA players for money. That's competition, period. What makes Sophie's willingness to speak up even more striking is how the WNBA typically handles dissent. It doesn't. This is a league where players are expected to present a united front, even when unity means ignoring uncomfortable truths. Calling out leadership or questioning internal politics can make you an outsider. Sophie did it anyway. That takes either serious courage or just a refusal to play along with the unwritten rules. And timing matters. These CBA negotiations are happening right now. The people representing players' interests are also running a competing league, and nobody's publicly addressing that? Conflicts of interest don't automatically mean bad behavior, but the standard practice is to disclose them, recuse yourself, or restructure roles to avoid them. As far as anyone knows, none of that has happened. Stewart and Collier remain in union leadership while running Unrivaled. And apparently, Sophie's the only one who thinks that's worth talking about. That's not how professionalism works. It's not how any major sports league should operate. The WNBA deserves the same standards of transparency and accountability that exist in other leagues. Yet somehow, Sophie's the one being called divisive for pointing it out, instead of the situation itself being recognized as the real issue. At the end of the day, Sophie Cunningham said what no one else in the WNBA had the guts to say. There's an obvious conflict of interest when Unrivaled's founders are also union vice presidents negotiating the CBA. Whether people agree or not, she forced a conversation that needed to happen. The cat's out of the bag now, and pretending it's not won't make it disappear. If you found this breakdown worth your time, hit like, subscribe for more honest takes, and let's hear from you. Is Sophie Cunningham the only WNBA player with the guts to speak the uncomfortable truth?